The original reason I went to British Columbia was to give a talk called Dial M for Zombie back in 2000 at a festival in Vancouver called 0 Degree Monstrosities that took place at the Western Front. And I did that performance with my colleague Randy Lee Cutler, and we pretended to contact a spiritualist technology called Time-Stream. Now, this was a real technology that people who believed in the afterlife would communicate with, and it was developed by technologists, scientists who firmly believed that when one passed the other side, one still had consciousness. So they developed this technology called Time-Stream, whereby the dead could contact through the living through technology. So they were teaching us how to develop our technology on our side, and this thing was called Time-Stream. So we were very interested in this idea of opening a space where the dead could communicate. So we did a performance where we pretended that the dead we pretended, maybe we didn't pretend, maybe we in fact did communicate with the spirits of the dead, but we acted like we were communicating with the spirits of the dead using this technology. The reason I bring that up is because I'm realizing, and I'm going to be quite improvisational now because I don't actually know how I'm going to join up the second half of the talk. But what I want to talk about is this feeling of, or the sense of an opening of portals, an opening of dimensions through which the dead ancestors, you can communicate with your ancestors or you can communicate with spirits that are outside of a linear temporal continuum. Like any mystical experience necessitates that you somehow break open kind of the continuum of linear time and enter into another kind of dimension. So we were playing ritually with that idea, but in fact, without that idea, it's hard to imagine how you do communicate with ghosts, spirits of the dead. How do they communicate to you? How do you work with them all? In what state of consciousness do you have to be for that kind of thing to happen? It was when we did that I realised, both Randy and I realised we were really into Philip K. Dick, and it was then that we realised that Dick had been in Vancouver, and it felt serendipitous or something like that. So we decided to work on this project called the Bug House, named after Ex-Calais, in fact. In fact, we didn't really know about Ex-Calais, but we called our project the Bug House based on what we thought the place Philip K. Dick had gone to would have been. Right? So this was already kind of in process. For me, Vancouver has always been like an off-world colony in the sense of Blade Runner. A new life awaits you in the off-world colony. And I really started to think about this. Like British Columbia is an off-world colony for Brits. It actually is a place where people still go to have this new life. In fact, Philip K. Dick went there to have this new life. There's this sense that it's a place you go for freedom, for like utopia. It's got this hugely utopian sense. But of course, in Philip K. Dick's narrative, that new life that awaits you is never what you think it is. So in Martian Time-Slip, or wherever you go into the planetary colonization, it's never quite as great as you think. And when you get there, you find there's something very wrong in the new colony. So we wanted to play with this idea of there's something very wrong in the new colony. And in 2000, Randy and I started on a film, which never kind of got finished. It was an experiment called When Is Now? Because the sense of trans-temporal weirdness in Vancouver has always really struck me. It feels like a futurological place from the past. It feels like a retro-futurological place. What's also interesting about Vancouver is that a lot of films are shot there, science fiction films, because it's cheap to shoot in Vancouver, right? So a lot of Hollywood films like Minority Report, Philip K. Dick type, and in fact, The Man in the High Castle was filmed at UBC. So British Columbia and Vancouver is always the backdrop, not always, often the backdrop for science fiction films, and often Philip K. Dick science fiction film. So when you're walking around, you have this uncanny deja vu all the time. That you're kind of in this, it looks like a Minority Report scenario. And then you go, it feels to me, maybe if you're Canadian it doesn't feel like that, but for me it's always like that. So this idea of when is now, when is the temporality of the present, it's always been a kind of significant issue. And one of the crucial experiences that Philip K. Dick had, which is where I tried to link these things together, was that in 2/4/1974, as he called it, which is February, March, was it 3/4/74, March, April. Anyway, in 1974, Philip K. Dick was blasted. Was blasted by a pink beam of light that came from an ichthys symbol. He had really bad toothache, and he'd ordered some sodium pentothal. Anyway, I can't remember what the particular thing was. And the person who delivered it in 1974 had a... Oh, it's the wrong way around. Should have anyway. Anyway, an ichthys symbol, and this ichthys symbol transmitted a message straight into Philip K. Dick's brain that stayed with him for quite a long time. And it told him that the Roman Empire hadn't ended. In fact, we were all living, well, people in California in 1974 were living in the Roman Empire. And the secret symbol of the Christians was still a secret symbol, because they were the people who had to hide their faith from the Romans, who would persecute and kill them if they knew. He basically had these revelations, and the revelation was that he was communicated with by an entity called Valis, which is Vast Active Living Intelligence System, and that told him that this reality that we're in is in fact a demiurgic matrix, basically. It's a matrix experience. And he'd been somehow communicated with and told the truth about what was really going on. That in fact we were all in this thing called the Black Iron Prison, and Black Iron Prison, BC Pen. This is we're trying to draw the analogy to BC Pen. What is the BC Pen? Is the BC Pen an imperialist, colonial, disciplinary institution? Yes. Why is it all First Nations people in there? Is it still going on? So, anyway, so this was the vision that he had. So his skull was cracked, really, in some ways, by Valis. So this opening onto a trans-temporal dimension, and he spent the rest of his life trying to explain what happened to him, understand what happened to him, and he put it all together in a book called Exegesis. I keep forgetting how to spell exegesis, which is probably telling. Once you get on a blackboard, the spelling goes like...
You got it.
Did I get it right? Okay, so he put it all together in the Exegesis, which was his 10-year book, nearly, trying to understand what happened to him, and that was recently published, so I was reading that in British Columbia. Now, so I'm trying to make the connection between the hamatsa, the skin changing, this animal connection, and the fold-over point. So this drawing I'm doing here is the new version of it, which is that there's a trans-temporal opening, rupture in some sort of continuum. I use a DNA helix here because there is some kind of strange correlation between this and the DNA helix. But there's all sorts of stuff about DNA too, but anyway, we'll just... this thing happened, this opening, this kind of opening. So when I was talking about the hamatsa and the Bizango also have the power of the Loup-Garou. The Loup-Garou is the werewolf, so they're shapeshifters. So when they do their ceremonials, they will say, and now it's time to change skins. So this idea of changing skin, and that you're stepping out of your human skin and into your animal skin, is very much part of Bizango mythology ritual practice. This links to the pig, and now the pig is a kind of key, crucial figure because pigs and humans have a special relationship, especially around cannibalism and pork, and this idea that human flesh tastes like pig flesh. Everyone says there's this whole idea of the pig and the human. So, and also in Haitian folklore, the Bizango or sorcerers have the power to turn you into a pig, send you off to the market to be butchered, and then you get eaten. So the kind of terrible stories, your family's eating you at the, for dinner. You're actually eating your own kin. So there is within the mythology that you could be eating your own kin. So I was trying to draw the parallels between kinship in animals, interspecies kinship. It's a slightly different story, but with the Kwakwaka'wakw and First Nations people, they have a very strong sense that their kin are other beings, other animals. So for instance, the salmon story is hugely important. So you may have heard the story, it's rehearsed several times, but it's true. Well, it's a fact. I mean, it's testifiably factual. Which is that amongst the Kwakwaka'wakw, the first salmon of the run is captured and eaten and prepared in a highly ritualized, symbolic way. It needs to be because it's an ancestor sacrificing itself for us. That's what they do. Our ancestors come and they give themselves to us, but they're our ancestors, they're our salmon kin. So we must be very, very respectful of the animals we eat because we depend on them. And ecologically, of course, this is part of the story. Right? So the salmon is prepared very carefully. Its remains, the bones, are then put back into the sea so it can return and tell the other ancestors at the bottom of the sea that we're still doing it right up there, we're still ritually doing things correctly, we're not messing about with the traditions which have been around a long time as to how we make sure we have a sustainable equilibrium with our fellow creatures. So that's... Now, the strange thing about this is that the K in Philip K. Dick's name, does anyone know what the K stands for? Okay, the K in Philip K. Dick stands for kindred. The story in Phil, and it was a deep part of Phil's sort of psychopathology, his problems, because when they were born, Phil was much greedier than his sister. His mother would tell him, "You just took all the milk. You took all the milk. You took everything. Your sister had nothing to eat. By the time she got to the breast, there was not enough left for her." So she died of malnutrition quite early on. I can't remember the exact details of this. So his twin sister died of malnutrition and he felt from his child that he was the person who ate too much. He was the greedy one. He's like the Hamatsa in the Hamatsa ritual who can't stop consuming. He just needs to take it all. The Hamatsa ritual is a ritual, a cannibal ritual, but what it's about is taming the cannibal spirit, because the cannibal spirit is the thing that can't stop eating. The cannibal spirit is the thing that just will consume, like the addicts, like the drug addicts who can never get enough, but always take more. So Phil had this deep, deep connection to a lost sister, a dead sister. And Valis, for him, was in many ways, and if you look at the whole mythos, one of the things he reflected on a lot, was that it was his dead sister trying to connect with him again. It would often be a female persona. It would speak to him in what he called the robot voice or a cyborg voice. So he was trying to connect with his lost sister on a deep symbolic level. Now, I can't draw all the threads together here, but what's interesting about what I found out about Quack mythology is that the salmon are also twins. So what I felt was I was trying to draw a connection between this Pisces image, the salmon squid, I won't really go this time. And I'm trying to draw a parallel. Is there any way we can connect Phil's cosmic vision after Valis and the exegesis with the interspecies cosmology of First Nations people? And this was what I've been trying, this was the bridge I've been trying to make. So what's sort of crucial about this, and I'll just kind of do the central bit, is the question of Christianity. It's a tough one, Christianity, right? You know, like, I say that only because, you know, Phil's later novels are increasingly Christian in their thematics, and they're deeply Christian, you know, but ancient Christian sort of thematics. Now, I only bring that up because the question of sacrifice and the question of the cannibalism is crucial to the sacrament, to the Christian sacrament. I mean, Christ was killed, he was sacrificed, but he offered himself up to be, his flesh to be eaten and his blood to be drunk. I mean, that is the deep Christian myth, right? It's a cannibalistic cult. So there is a clear link between this question of sacrifice and cannibalism within the Christian cultus, let's say. That Christian cultus is kind of close to the Pisces ichthys symbol because of the loaves and fishes question. I mean, it's not... The history of the ichthys symbol is shrouded in mystery. But, you know, and it may or may not be the case that the idea that the miracle of the loaves and fishes has to do with it. But certainly this idea of sacrifice, the fish symbol, some sort of deep cannibalistic kinship was what I was trying to draw out. This is kind of as far as we've got with trying to work out where there might be cosmological parallel between Dick's Valis experience and Hock, the skullcracker bird, and the opening up. And the thing is that, of course, people say to me, well, how can a bird be a cannibal? Because a cannibal bird would only eat other birds, right? Like, that's the whole point. It's because it's our kin that it eats us. It's a cannibal because anything that eats anything else is a cannibal from this cosmological perspective. So we have to understand this deep predatory interdependence that we have with our environments, our ecosystems, and the other species we live with. So I'm going to maybe just sort of round up now, because I think I'm going to try and tie things up. It never really ties up, but this is kind of as far as I've kind of got with thinking. But I do want to talk about Extinction Rebellions, ecological imperialism with... when I gave this talk in 2016, the concept of indigenomics had only just started to be kind of talked about. It was a new concept, and it's associated with someone called Carol Ann Hilton, and I would really recommend you look at the work of Carol Ann Hilton, and I would seriously want to endorse her project and her work. But now there's a big conference coming up in Vancouver on indigenomics this year, I think in June. And what this is, it's almost like the dream of kind of like, because this was the idea, is there really something still in potlatch that offers a challenge, or the modes of economic relationship and exchange that have been traditional to the Pacific Northwest for forever, that could transform and mutate capitalism? Is there still the potential to do that? And indigenomics is precisely, as I understand it, an attempt to take indigenous knowledge systems and use them in the light of the truth and reconciliation process, which is taking place in between this, and actually really deal with this problem. So the reason I'm bringing that to Extinction Rebellion and ecological imperialism, I won't rehearse ecological imperialism too much, but I've been very conscious in British Columbia that there seems to me, and I'm very honoured and privileged to have very good friends in British Columbia who are super conscious and super aware of the politics of indigeneity and the difficulties of decolonisation in the region. But they're exceptional. And there's a lot of people in there who don't give a damn about all that stuff. And there's still this kind of process of treating British Columbia, treating kind of like this Pacific Eden, is what I see it as. Like people go there to experience this absolute plenitude of nature. And that to me is still part of the imperialist project. There's something about ecologism and ecology which to me is still closely linked to an imperial project, which needs to be untweaked, unteased and pulled apart. So I bring that up because Extinction Rebellion, and I just say this because I guess this is just very current. Okay, what can I say? There's been an article in a journal called Acorn, which is a radical green ecology magazine. Are you familiar with this? Okay, so I live in a place called Stroud. I moved there a year ago. And Stroud is one of the epicenters for Extinction Rebellion. It's had ecological activists there for many years. You know, they're one of the oldest health food shops and organic cafes since the 1920s. There's a lot of Steiner people there, been there for a long time. They've had a lot of kind of earth-first sensibility. There's also something called Ecotricity, which is a green energy company there, which is run by a guy called Dale Vince. But he's made a lot of money with green energy. So my suspicion was that there's a kind of green energy agenda, corporate green energy agenda underneath Extinction Rebellion. And again, that's fine. There's no problem with there being a corporate capitalist New Green Deal agenda, really. But it reminds me that how, for Bataille and for traditional communist critical theorists, capitalism was the enemy. That, you know, for Reclaim the Streets, for Climate Camp, all those actions, we saw capitalism as in no way compatible with an ecological movement. And I think that's very interesting because what we're finding with indigenomics is you can't simply say, okay, we can't work with capitalism because capitalism is part of an imperialist project which has destroyed First Nations communities, it's part of the imperial machine. You have to somehow, well, the question is, do we have to work with capitalism in some ways if we're really going to change the direction that things are going in? And indigenomics is a process like that. And I think Extinction Rebellion and the people behind Extinction Rebellion recognise this, and that's where they're going. So I just sort of wanted to bring that in, to bring it back to Patrick Perry and ecological ethics, and sort of bring it full circle, that perhaps cannibal metaphysics has a role to play, or has some value for how we might think about the necessary relations between capitalism and indigenous resurgence in the here and now. So that's where I'm going to end it. Thanks.